Why watch Tucker Carlson? I mean, why focus on him?
Well, he's the new king of cable news. He is the heir to Bill O'Reilly. He took over O'Reilly's time slot, that prime 8 p.m. time slot on Fox News, and he is the #1 rated show in all of cable news. Plus, he is the founder of The Daily Caller, which is becoming an increasingly significant news source on the right. Now, he's no longer the editor-in-chief day-to-day, but he's still the chairman of the board, very important figure in the media.
All right, let's watch some of his show from last night. Here's Tucker.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The president, as you may have heard, fired back at the media today in New York.
But lost in the hysteria is that he did again very clearly denounce neo-Nazis, and he pointed out something liberals do not want to admit, that there was violence among some of the counter-protesters like Antifa.
That's how Tucker opened his show last night. What stands out to me is he's instantly pitting the president's enemy as the media. Not white supremacists, not the president's own words, but the media.
Right, and Trump and his boosters love that dynamic. They love the press versus the president back and forth. And what you have right there is Tucker sort of setting it up in a way where the problem here is not starting with what the president said or didn't say on Saturday about what happened in Charlottesville, his refusal to condemn white supremacists by name on Saturday. The problem is that the media has been badgering him for several days. This sort of beleaguered president has finally had enough, and now he's pushing back.
I want to show you some more of Ed Henry talking to Tucker Carlson because they're really focused not on white supremacists and the alt-right, but this thing they're calling the alt-left.
Then, as he was pressed on whether he was putting radicals of the alt-left on the same moral plane as white supremacists.
That alt-left phrasing is a Sean Hannity favorite, and the president appears to be sort of picking up on it. And we've seen this before, where the president takes some of his arguments from what he sees on Fox News. This is a reminder of why shows like Hannity's, Tucker Carlson's, and so much of the programming on Fox News is so significant. It's not just about reflecting conservative thought and opinion. It's also shaping it in a lot of ways, and not just what other Republicans think, but what the president thinks. They've got a direct pipeline to the Oval Office in some cases.
Through his remote control. I mean, not just through picking up the phone, but also what he watches on Fox News. But alt-left is this generated term, and there is no self-declared alt-left, Cal.
No, it's not. That's sort of the great difference here, right, is that the alt-right is a group that self-identifies as alt-right, and it is a pure invention by Sean Hannity and others on the right. It's essentially just sort of a counterpoint. And we've seen this before. This is a classic Trump strategy that we saw over and over during the campaign. Well, you call me this name, I'm going to throw the equivalent name right back at you. But that would be a big difference. I mean, the alt-right is a self-identified group that has a certain set of beliefs. Alt-left is just made up.
Okay, so Tucker does a monologue oftentimes, and so we heard him focus last night on statues. And instead of talking about white supremacy or the president's sort of political missteps here, he focused on this question of whether statues should be torn down.
Which statues are next, the president asked today? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson? It's not a joke. Suddenly, it's a serious question. But to the fanatics on the left, it means that Jefferson must be purged from public memory forever. But let's be honest, up until 150 years ago, when a group of brave Americans fought and died to finally put an end to it, slavery was the rule rather than the exception around the world, and had been for thousands of years, sadly.
What fascinates me here, Cal, is that just like the president, Tucker Carlson is trying to shift the conversation to monuments and statues and get it away from this question of racism or white supremacy.
And there is an ongoing debate, for sure, in this country about whether these statues should live on. But that was not the central issue, of course, over the weekend, right? These were not just mainstream conservatives who said, hey, I'm not really comfortable with removing this bit of history. These were hateful neo-Nazi KKK types, right? A totally different class of people. And so it's a little bit of a straw man to kind of say, well, this was really just about Confederate statues. To hear Tucker Carlson tell the story, you would think that this is, a clear and present danger, that if you don't stand up for it right now, tomorrow these statues are going to be wiped out.
Tucker Carlson also interviews a senior correspondent for The Federalist, a conservative publication. And what they really focus on is the left.
John, this does seem like a turning point somehow, not just on the right, but also on the left, these events of the last 2 days. And there seems to be a new intensity on the left. Am I imagining that?
No, you're not.
So, Cal, this strikes me because instead of talking about the intensity of the right, white supremacy, which you really can't get much more intense than that, talking about neo-Nazism. They're talking about this left movement that they perceive of as being a threat.
And they're the instigators, to hear Tucker Carlson tell it.
Right.
You know, they're the ones who are starting the heated rhetoric.
And that they are even equivalent to the Taliban. Listen to this.
And the Taliban did that in Afghanistan. But it's not about that. The people who are attacking these statues know nothing about history. They don't know who Robert E. Lee was. They don't know who Stonewall Jackson was.
Cal, I think the protesters do know who Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee were. I think that's the problem, which is why people who call for the statues to be taken down want to see that happen. But setting that aside for a moment, comparing people who want statues taken down here in the United States with the Taliban is fascinating.
Right. It's sort of this oversimplification where all removals of statues in history are the same. So, you know, later in the show you had Tucker citing an example of the Taliban destroying Buddhist statues in Afghanistan because it didn't comport with their worldview. And essentially saying that's basically the same thing that these protesters are doing when they want to remove Confederate statues.
To wrap this up, Cal, how much is Tucker Carlson's language and tone jiving with the rest of Fox News?
Well, it's interesting. If you watched a full day of Fox News, it would be a schizophrenic experience, Libby, because, you know, you start the day with Fox and Friends, which is just absolute fanboy Trump all the time. Everything he does is perfect, and there's basically no criticism. In the middle of the day, you get shows like, you know, Shepard Smith reporting, and Smith is very critical of the president frequently. And then in the evenings, you get other shows like Tucker Carlson's and Sean Hannity's that are, again, heaping praise on everything the president does. But if he starts to lose people on Fox News, or if he loses Breitbart, that's when I think he's going to fret a little bit.
Which makes Fox News so important to watch, both in terms of tone and message. I'm Libby Casey. I'm with Cal Borchers. Thanks so much, Cal. Really appreciate your time.